cannot start my day without my comedy news from last night. The only news source that gives the events the commentary it deserves. Hi kids, it's Rowan. Oh, I'm wearing a shirt today. Hooray for me, wearing clothes. So, speaking of socks, I'm still fiddling around with the, little system of a couple of socks, to act as a bit of an easel for, oh, I could probably find one of those. Okay, kids, I finally found what I was looking for, the, little tiny embroidery skizzers I've got, which have this gorgeous Art Deco design. I found these at, I think it was Joanne. Yeah, it was Joanne. So, what was I... Wasn't there a pair? I don't care. I'll figure it out. Oh, I like these. And I like those. And I like those. So, let me see how many socks I can darn while I'm doing what? I want to talk about something, excuse me, that, keeps coming up amongst various people. Oh, hey, I still had some on. That is, oh dear, where are they going? That frequently comes up on, various, fora for goths, etc. And it is a topic called, like, some people think it exists, others say, no, it's complete bullshit, and it is called the Gothic mindset. What is this? Where does it come from? Is this a thing? And somebody on, I think it was Reddit today, yeah, it was Reddit today, said that this isn't a thing, that it's simply, like, shared interests, but that goth is diverse. And I started... Did I pick? I did. And I thought to myself a bit about that. Like, what even... what do people think they're even talking about when, you know, someone else says the Gothic mindset? And that is too short for what I'm doing. So what do people even think that folks are talking about when someone says the Goth mindset? And I've seen this come up with some older people. It was Amy Necrotique whose video sparked this conversation in the first place, and I think I know what she's talking about when she says this, and I see this coming up amongst people about my age, thereabouts, which she is. She's a little bit younger, I think, like maybe by a year or two, but, you know, we're about the same age. That's the important part, is, you know, she and I are about the same age, and, you know, I'm pretty sure I know what she's talking about with, you know, mentioning the Gothic mindset. And this is generally an idea of shared interests, which would be interests in goth music, Gothic, and, you know, the Gothic aesthetic, whether that, you know, to some varying degrees being fashion, decor, Gothic literature, Gothic Gothic art, including film and television, as well as painting, sculpture, and illustration. So, like, Chaz Adams, creator of the Addams Family, I think that's somebody whose, at least whose art, most people would agree is Gothic. as well as being generally popular amongst Goths. Tim Burton, his films do generally follow various Gothic themes. The writings and graphic stories of Neil Gaiman as well. Then we've got films such as The Hunger. I wouldn't necessarily say The Crow, but it's sort of in that family and addresses topics generally of shared interest among Goths, which would include a fascination with the macabre, an affinity for things, that are generally shunned by other people, such as anything from death and simply talking about it, much less addressing it, to even animals regarded as bad omens or unlucky or just, ew, yucky cootie. Seeing the beautiful in things that, might otherwise be considered ugly. Topics of the occult. These are all, shared interests that I think, comes across universally, at least to, amongst Goths about my age, as something that falls within the Gothic mindset. So, does it exist? In a way, yes. It's not... I'm not saying that all Goths share this, same philosophical, view of the world. Though some have certainly tried to say so, including, very poorly, Raven Digitalis, author of Gothcraft, which he even says is kind of an embarrassment to him, but... Yeah, and he's even said this on Facebook, so, publicly even, though for different reasons than I do, than I think. I think it's a better description of the Gothic subculture than it is about paganism, much less, witchcraft and spiritual philosophies. Is there one unified philosophy other than, sharing an affinity, with, the dark and mysterious and the rejected? Not really, because people can look at that affinity, in various ways. Obviously, we have no unified religion. There are, people on Facebook and YouTube and other social media platforms, who are very outspoken about, oh, I'm Christian Goth, and I really hate when people do that, not because I hate Christians necessarily. I've known a lot of very pleasant Christians, but I've noticed that amongst the Goths who are, many are, have to parade this around, thus creating a false dichotomy between Christian Goths and all us other Goths who, are therefore implicitly either non-Christian or anti-Christian. And while there are certainly, in my experiences, there are certainly more Goths who are non-Christian than there are Goths who are, especially compared to how that works out amongst everybody else, you know, from other subcultures to, you know, to simply, you know, mainstream society. This, I've noticed, you know, there are very few who are anti-Christian. I'm very glad to see that on YouTube there's this resurfacing amongst younger Goths being pagan again. And I say again because when I was in high school in the mid-1990s, it was fairly common for Goths to at least dabble in pagan spirituality, whether, you know, they got involved in something a little bit more organized, like Wicca, or, you know, let's face it, this is high school kids. You know, we're talking, like, whatever they could pass off from, you know, whatever they interpreted as being Wicca-like after reading a few books from that creepy store down this, in Ann Arbor, because I went to a high school in rural Michigan, or where there were, like, literally, like, 5 Goths. I was literally one of, like, 5 Goths. You know, or sometimes, you know, if we didn't care about about other kids at school finding out and potentially bullying us, which did happen, at least with me, a lot, ordering books from Walden Book at the mall. And it was Walden Book, right? Or was it? I might have been a B. Dalton first, and then a Walden Book. But no, so, you know, it's not, but, you know, I see a lot of atheists. I see a lot of, you know, atheists who, you know, join the Satanic Temple, which, let's face it, it's, you know, atheism as described by Anton LaVey, which I can say with some authority because I was, you know, for a few years, you know, an obnoxious edgelord Satanist, and then I transitioned to male and got that out of my system, or at least I came to terms with the fact that I had to do this, got that out of my system, and became generally an okay person. I don't know. I'd like to think I'm a good person, but I'm going to let that speak for itself, and other people can be the judge of that. Because I'm sure Hitler thought he was a good person, but obviously history says another story based on his deeds in life. And does this need a one? No, that one's fine. So yeah, you know, there's no unified, you know, philosophy, obviously. There's no unified religious affiliations, even amongst those of us who are pagan. You know, pagan is a very broad umbrella term. And it includes Wicca, obviously. It includes various forms of polytheism, which are usually, which most of them, most polytheists look to the gods worshipped in ancient cultures, or at least pre-Christian and non-Christian cultures. You know, Hindus, you know, or at least certain schools of Hinduism. Hinduism is about as succinct, you know, to describe Hinduism, to describe religion as somebody as, you know, Hinduism being their religion, is about as clear as saying that somebody's religion is Christian. You know, there are some, you know, there are far fewer broad generalizations you could say about what they believe and what they practice than you might think, you know, at least if you know significant about, you know, like, you know, Baptists don't do the same things as Catholics or Mormons, and depending on who you ask, you know, Mormons, may or may not exactly be Christian, but instead this new Abrahamic movement that is based on Bible fanfic. And the young man I'm cohabitating with grew up Mormon, and the more he describes about it, the more cultish it seems. But I suppose, well, then again, I know to a Jehovah's Witness, I grew up Catholic, and they almost always, think that Catholicism sounds very pagan because, Catholicism, as it was spreading across Europe, took the stance that, okay, pagans aren't going to give up everything that they do to convert, so let's design the local practices around, of Catholicism around pagans. Let's, oh, little tiny one. So, let's turn some of these pagan gods into saints. Let's, so it was a PR move. Catholicism is very syncretic in its practices. Or at least it started that way, and very much became its own, its own form of Christianity, and a lot of Protestants, I think, are coming from this, rejection of Catholic practices, or at least, when their church is formed, it seems very much, intent on this idea of purity, ideological and, of ideology and of practice, and it's like, that just seems a little self-defeating because, what is purity, right? And, which brings me back around to, like, what is the Gothic mindset? I mean, you can say that, oh, right, polytheists, there are some newer, polytheist, religions, based on, what is recognized as newer gods, depending on either the practice or the practitioner. Some will relate to these as, other spiritual entities. Then related to polytheism are animist practices, which is reverence of spirits and entities within the natural world. Again, this even varies on how you describe it. But talking about purity, it's like, yeah, there are some, there's a lot of overlap on the Venn, which I think, is what Amy Necrotique, and certainly, myself and at least a couple other goths, that's goths about my own age that I've known, at this point, most of my life. This is what I'm talking about, and what I'm pretty sure she's talking about, and what I know a few others are talking about, and probably what some others are talking about. When we reference the Gothic mindset, it's like, this is not, we're not talking about a unified philosophy. That's too big to mend. Son of a bitch. I really liked this pair, too. So, we're not talking about a unified philosophy. We're not talking about, unified, religions. We're not talking about unified politics either. While, anarchists, especially, anarcho-communists, like Vi, from, Poison Girls, whose, children, went on, to form Rebella Ballet. Yeah, she got into, fuck! I forgot her surname for the band. She died a couple years ago, too, but she was, like, in her 80s, so she had a good life. Vi from Poison Girls, that's all I'm remembering right now. So she was an anarcho-socialist in the UK, Polish immigrant, if I'm not mistaken, and her kids went on to form Rubella Ballet. One of her sons, one of her daughters, and maybe she only just had the two. In Los Angeles, anarcho-punk was also, a big driving influence in the death rock scene. Though specifically the hardcore punk of the Germs, the Adolescents. In the UK, there was a lot of, very overtly political, and less ambiguously so. I think a lot of hardcore punk bands in Los Angeles, late 70s, very early 80s, were a little bit more ambiguous, but I've talked to, when I lived in LA, I talked to a lot of people who were involved then, and it is, it had more in common with the UK anarcho-punk scene than not. So there was that's a very common thread, especially the cult. The cult, especially when they were Southern Death Cult, were very much political. Same with Theater of Hate, TSOL from LA. In fact, one of the men from that band, he's a libertarian socialist, which is basically like the purest form of the original pre-ANCAP libertarians. So the ones who actually get what liberty is and not what sucking up to the corporate greed is and capitalism. So then what happened? So yeah, there's a lot of but people are going to also interpret this differently. So yes, anarcho-socialism, especially in the interpretations of a lot of certain, foundational punk bands, is certainly has certainly been influential in early Gothic rock and other Gothic music, and has certainly been foundational in early Gothic music, but that doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to get the same message out of it. In fact, I've got some friends who I'm all but giving up engaging when they make responses to my DJ page on Facebook, which I kind of just use as a dumping ground for political posts, because my station manager wants me to tone it down a bit on the station page, and but I want to keep my personal Facebook profile friends only, and I think a lot of this needs to go, needs to reach a public audience. So my DJ page is where I don't, tone it down, and where I don't keep my mouth shut. But there are some friends of mine where I've got to just stop engaging with them, or they're just going to drive me fucking nuts. And if they reach there's a breaking point that I've got with everybody. If you cross that line, I just, no, it's not worth being friends with you anymore. But yeah, obviously people are going to interpret, these ideals differently. So yeah, there's no unifying sense of politics or religion, philosophical interpretations, but, I mean, what's a mindset? There's no definition of a mindset. There's a definition of philosophies. There's a definition for political views and spiritual views, and these socks don't match. These socks don't actually match. Son of a whore. Closest we can come to with goth is, you know, it is a subculture based on, based primarily on music, and includes an appreciation for Gothic artistic movements, an interest in occult spirituality, or at least symbolism, or, you know, or more esoteric, you know, or more esoteric interpretations of religion. You know, it's more Gnostic than it is agnostic as far as religion goes. You know, Gnostic Christianity, like, the best Goths I know who are Christians tend to lean more toward the Gnostic ideals. And, you know, a general appreciation for the macabre and outsiders, and tend to have, you know, more progressive ideas about religion and politics and spirituality. How they're defining this, again, that's up to interpretation, but is there a goth mindset? Yes, because, I mean, at least I know what I'm talking about when I say that, but is it something that is going to look exactly the same in everybody? Of course not. Of course not. You know, you get two Baptists in a room, they're going to eventually disagree on something. When we look at the fact that the Gothic subculture is based on music, art, literature, and, you know, an affinity for the macabre, the occult, and, you know, the outside, and the outsiders, then, you know, yes, there is a Gothic mindset. Now, something else I want to touch on is, what the fuck is Gothic music? Goth music is generally defined in two terms, and this is something that I've been talking with friends older than myself, and about my age, and to some extent younger than myself, for... Oh god, I need to polish my loop. That's what's up. For going on... How old am I now? Definitely over 15 years. And there are two basic criteria for what makes... You know, for what defines goth music. Goth music is, you know, the first definition is music made by and for people who identify as members of the Gothic subculture. And this knotted. Now, if this was the only form of goth music, there would be very little of it. In fact, like, I can't think... In fact, like, almost none of the early bands would be considered goth, because they don't exactly consider them, like Bauhaus. Peter Murphy has stated numerous times that he has no interest in participating in the Gothic subculture. You know, he's not even really sure what that is, you know, apparently. And looks like I gotta do a thing. Andrew Eldritch definitely has negative interest in goth as a subculture. There was a very heinous incident with Sunshine Blind 100,000 years ago. Well, more like in the early 90s. And the second definition is music that goths tend to like. Now, tend to like. And I'm saying this because, you know, you're going to encounter, you know, several bands that not every goth likes, but You know, you can say with relative certainty, yes, this person is a goth, even if they don't like Susie and the Banshees. Since in the goth subculture, listen to this music. Or at least a not insignificant number of people. Did I put it that way? I'll figure it out in editing. So this would include, and I'm going to go by genre rather than band. This would include, you know, death rock. This would include that wonderful, indefinable group of bands who played the Batcave. This would be avant-garde music, be it avant-garde punk, avant-garde classical. So we've got Virgin Prunes, who actually never played the Batcave, and while Gavin Friday has warmed up to the goth subculture, he considers Virgin Prunes avant-garde punk. Just like, it's like, no, we just did our thing. You know, we weren't part of the Batcave scene. You know, we fizzled before gothic rock really took off as its own genre. We were just weird avant-garde, far avant-garde Irish punk kids. You know, so we've got, like I said, death rock. You know, the indefinable amalgamation of bands that played the Batcave. We've got avant-garde music. We've got post-punk, which is very broad. You know, it includes Susie, it includes Echo and the Bunnymen, it includes The Cure, depending on how you're defining it, Joy Division. That's what I was thinking of. Gothic rock, obviously. You know, what has become retroactively and actively defined as dark cabaret. I'm thinking Christian and the Death's Catastrophe Ballet and Ashes Records. I'm thinking a lot of Sex Gang Children. I'm thinking Gavin Friday solo. Like, that's very much in dark cabaret vein, especially the Shag Tobacco album. You know, dark cabaret, what's, even industrial music, a lot of goths like industrial music. You know, going by the attendance at the last times Skinny Puppy and My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult came around to the Detroit area, you know, this is music goths like. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's not, it is definable even if that definition is broad. You know, Angela Benedict, you know, gave the same explanation, you know, dark wave, you know, be it of, you know, we've got dark, you know, folk, you know, including like Velvet Underground, Nico, excuse me, Leonard Cohen. You know, a lot of music that, you know, falls under an umbrella of goth music. It's not, you know, a single, like, you don't, you know, have to listen to only gothic rock. In fact, very few goths do. A lot of us, even, for some reason, there's a lot of goths who like, this came up in another Reddit thread, speaking of, you know, shit I'm just talking about in Reddit threads. I guess in some places, that, you know, this one place anyway, there's a number of goths who really are into the Swedish pop band Aqua. A lot of goths fucking love Queen. Everybody fucking loves Queen. You know, then we've got, you know, the more artsy glam rock that came out of the 70s, like Cockney Rebel, David Bowie, Roxy Music, Jabriath. You know, this you know, is definitely in the realm of music goths like. You know, there's goth-adjacent, you know, branches of New Romantics, even though in the early 80s in the UK, like in the US, you know, who would become goths warmed up to the New Romantic bands a lot more readily, but in the UK it's taken the people older than myself much longer to warm up to the New Romantic bands like Visage, Duran Duran. Against their wishes, Japan has been identified as New Romantics, back then, even now, because, you know, these bands were seen as very mainstream friendly, very pop oriented, very radio, you know, aspiring, you know, very top of the pops. But in the U.S., these bands were on college stations, so. But yeah, so if you're into the music, you have a you have a leg in. If you're into the autistic movements, there's you're sticking your right arm in as well. And if you call yourself a goth and participate in the gothic subculture, then you are. It's as simple as that. And that's the gothic mindset. Is you're into the music, you're into the artistic movements associated with it, you're into the social aspects, including an appreciation for the macabre, an interest in esoteric aspects of spirituality, including ritual and occult symbolism, Gnostic Christianity, just things outside the mainstream. You've got an affinity with outsiders, there you are. That's the Gothic mindset in under 45 minutes. I've taken way too long to explain something that seems very simple to me, but I wanted to get things, I wanted to make things clear enough. Hopefully I did. If not, I'll figure it out in editing and maybe reshoot the whole thing. If I did do it well enough, well, it's going to go up as is, and I will leave this part on because I'm a very, very organized person, aren't I? Alright, time to, try and wrap up what the fuck I'm doing here with my life. Put away the needles so that the cats don't, do horrible things with them, and go out to my food pantry. So, bats and kisses, kids. I love you all. And